Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 113. It's Wednesday, 1st of February. Dennis Crowder here with Kasper Ozolowski with another fun installment of Submission Radio this week. Isn't that right, Cass?
Yeah, fun is the theme of the show. Another spicy episode. The Spicy Boys are back. We've got some sexy, spicy guests, which include such spicy names as Dillon Danis, fresh off his victory at Submission Underground 3 over AJ Azagam. He's returning to the show, talking about a whole bunch of things. We're going to have a bit of fun with him. And, of course, we've got to ask about this whole John Jones saga. Tyson Pedro, a very beloved Aussie who made his debut at UFC Melbourne. He's now fighting at UFC 209 against Paul Craig. I feel like not enough people know his story, so we're going to have Tyson Pedro to come on the show. Oh, and he's just the newest addition of Jackson Winkeljohn, so a lot to talk to there. Speaking of Jackson Winkeljohn, we do have Coach Wink on the program as well. A lot of things to discuss there, like Cowboy Cerrone, Andrei Arlovski, of course, Holly Holm, fighting for the featherweight title at UFC 208, and then the natural himself, Randy Couture. It's been a while since we've had him on the show, but a lot of things to talk to Randy about as well in terms of legal things, the Ali Act, and of course his fun movies coming out in the future. So a lot of sexy stuff, isn't there, Dennis?
Yeah, that's right. And Damon Martin will be joining us on the program this week as well. We've got Damon on the program to talk about some of the stuff that happened last weekend with Cerrone and Pena losing. We'll discuss that. And also this pay-per-view that Conor McGregor had where Ariel Helwani interviewed him. We'll sort of talk a little bit about this Mayweather-McGregor fight, if we think it's going to happen, if Mayweather's going to give him the deal that he deserves, and sort of where he stands with the UFC. Very excited about that. And of course, because Damon has a website called Nerdcore Movement, we'll quickly touch on a couple of movies that are coming out as well. Very excited about a couple of flicks on the horizon. We'll get Damon's thoughts on the trailers. And of course, Kasper has a bit of a sneaky review for Split as well. So a lot on this program, Cass.
Yeah. Before we get into it and get to all the interviews, just a reminder, if you do feel like it, by all means, jump on iTunes and give us a review. The reviews have been pouring in, and some really good ones. This was one that I've wanted to read for a while now. It's from Griff Gamer from the United States, and I'll read it right now. By far my favorite MMA podcast. The boys are hilarious. The guests and interviews are fantastic, with 0% fawning or psychophantism, except for Don Fry, which is justified. Seriously, which other podcast has Don Fry on multiple times a year? That alone gets you 4 stars in my book. Their coverage of events is great as well. Perfect combination of MMA and Seinfeld references. What more can you ask for? My only complaint is that there's only one a week. Lazy Australians. That's okay, we don't hold it against you, and the 0% fawning, those are scientific facts backed by science. So Griff Gamer, we really appreciate it. And if you go, and he did give 5 stars, so if you want to give any kind of reviews, be it however many stars you think we deserve, it always helps the program.
Yeah, jump on, give us a review, give us your thoughts. We love reading them, and who knows, maybe we'll read them on the next show. Jump on and do it. And also jump on our Twitter and Facebook, Twitter at SubmissionAUS, Facebook.com/Submission Radio AUS. Jump on, like the page, give us your thoughts. We'd love to hear your thoughts after the episode comes out and what we say. If you agree with us, if you disagree, your thoughts on the guests, what we speak about. We love talking to all the listeners. You're actually able to message us through Twitter. All the messaging is open. We don't have to follow you back. So there's a few ways to get in contact with us, and we love talking to you. But it's a huge episode of Submission Radio. So many fun guests. And Kasper, our first one's on the line. You're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our next guest most recently scored a huge first-round win and made a big splash in his UFC debut at UFC Melbourne. He will now be facing Paul Craig at the very stacked UFC 209 on March 4th. Tyson Pedro, welcome to Submission Radio. How's it going?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Now, Tyson, you're currently joining us from Albuquerque. Is that right? Because a lot of Australians were excited to see you making the trip overseas.
Yeah, I'm here now at Jackson. That's why you can hear everything's going crazy in the background. I'm trying to find somewhere quiet, but sun is going off.
Wow.
All right, now we're clear. Yeah, I'm really enjoying being over here. It's been an awesome experience. A lot of people are happy that I made the move, and I think I am as well. It's been just, I've dreamed of coming here since a kid, and now to be here, it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah. How did that all come about? How did you go from training in Australia to making the trip to Jackson's? Who contacted who? What happened?
I was planning on coming here just for the experience. I was going to come over here for a month and just see how I liked it. And just before I came over, I found out that I had the fight. So instead of coming here for the 1 month and going back, I ended up just staying over here and just making it the camp.
Well, you've said that you wanted to train there since you were a kid. What was it like finally being there? And did it sort of live up to the expectations that you had in your head?
The coaching-wise, yeah, it's been pretty amazing. I couldn't say that there was too much difference with training partners as of yet because I haven't really gotten to train with a lot of the pros. They're all out, but the coaching-wise, it's on a pretty different level, and that's what's made it for me. And this is really the first proper camp that I've done. Like I've been working full-time jobs as well before all of my other fights, so this is it's been an experience just recovery-wise even.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you've obviously explained how this is something that you've dreamed about since you were a kid, and obviously Jackson Winkeljohn's is a massive gym, but why Jackson Winkeljohn specifically as opposed to, say, like an American Top Team or AKA or any number of the other gyms in the US?
Yeah, I trained at Integrated before I was at Lions when I was in Brisbane, and I was there with Coach Dan Higgins and Kyle Noak, and these guys, they had already trained here and done like pretty much, I think Coach Higgins did 6 years here, and after they described it for me, I just knew that this is what I wanted, their style of coaching, and it just seemed like a fit for me.
Well, looking at the pictures on Instagram and Twitter, you look like a kid in a candy store meeting all the big-name legendary fighters. What was it like for you, and how did everybody welcome you to the gym? Has everybody been nice and welcoming to the new Aussie in the gym?
A lot of the people here are nice. At first, I think it's like anything, the first week or so, it's just a filling out process when no one knows you, especially when you have so many people coming through this gym. But now that I'm sort of getting settled, the coaches are like I'm really taken to the coaches and even the training partners. It's just like any gym. There's some like points that you really like about it, and it's been like I said, the coaching has just killed it for me. That's what's put it over the edge for me.
We saw you got a photo with Andrei Arlovsky and a bunch of other fighters. Who stands out to you? Anybody that you get along with in particular?
I was just lucky they asked me to help out the last couple sessions with Andre, so I was pretty sad to see him go out in that fashion. But at the moment, training partners-wise, no, not really. I've got my little cousin here, and he's been helping me out a lot. But no, not at the moment. I haven't really. It's only been 3 weeks, so it hasn't been anything crazy.
Now, Coach Wink is a friend of the program and actually on this show as well, and he always talks to us about the dorm rooms over there in the gym. So, I mean, the big question is, are you actually bunking in the gym or are you staying outside of it?
No, that's why I was very lucky. I've only just started working with Coach Wink, but I had heard beforehand that the beds are pretty small, so being 6'4", I knew that wasn't going to be the go for me. So we got a little house just off and got our little rental car, and we've been cruising back and forth.
Yeah, what do you think of Albuquerque in general? I imagine it's a pretty big transition from, here in Australia. We hear it's a really quiet area. How are you finding it there?
Yeah, I think that's the reason why everyone trains so hard here. There's not much to do. We found that out in the first 2 weeks. So we've been shooting a couple times already, and that's about it. We just train every day and recover. Luckily, they've got a cryo up here because I hate the ice bath. So we've been able to go get our cryo sessions in, and that's about it, just training.
Have you been to the Breaking Bad house yet? I hear apparently somebody throws a fresh pizza on the roof every once in a while there.
No, we haven't. I haven't seen it, but it's funny because I didn't actually know that it was recorded here. That's the season that I'm smashing out at the moment. So,
oh wow!
I started watching it while I was over here.
Yeah, I'm also wondering, what the biggest sort of difference is between the training in Jackson Winkeljohn's compared to in Australia. And also, is this, I know you said you're going to finish out your camp there. Is this a permanent move? Will you be doing all your training camps there from now on? Or is this sort of a one-time thing?
I couldn't say for sure. I've enjoyed the coaching so much that I could see myself definitely coming back here because it's been such an experience for me. I couldn't call anything at the moment, but I've got my dad and the owner of Lions still coming up for my corner this next fight. I'm hoping that I'll be able to have someone in from Jackson's in my corner. But nothing. I couldn't confirm anything at the moment.
Well, let's go back in time for a second. Your UFC debut seemed to happen so fast that people didn't get a chance to absorb your story. Tell us, how did you originally get into MMA?
I've been doing some sort of martial arts for about 17 years. I started when I was a young kid, just in traditional martial arts. And then my dad actually bought the rights to King of the Cage in Australia. Started having fight shows, and I've been training with James Sahuna and the likes of since I was there when Tony Gambinello was coming through, and training with them since I was a kid. So I've been around martial arts my whole life, and it's just it went from traditional martial arts to jiu-jitsu to boxing, back to jiu-jitsu, and then eventually it just came into mixed martial arts. There was no really other road for me to go.
We know that you've been loving on the BJJ lifestyle for the last few years, but just sort of when you entered into MMA, when you entered into martial arts, what is it that made you want to get into it? Obviously, your dad had that heavy presence in there, but we hear stories about where some people, they get bullied, they want to defend themselves. Some people, there's just something that they're drawn to. What was it? What was the reason why you first actually went to your first martial arts class?
It was exactly that. My dad has 7 black belts in 7 different styles. And he started training me from when I was about 3 or 4. We started in our garage.
Wow.
And that's where James Sahuna and Thomas Sahuna, Brad Morris, all these people were training in the garage with us. And, they had their first MMA fights under my dad. He was coaching them. So it's pretty much been a family thing. And I've said it a few times, but whenever other kids were kicking the football out in the backyard, my brothers and sisters, we were choking each other out.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's crazy your story, because if someone looks at your record, there's a handful of fights there. And I mean, the story is just crazy of how you got into the UFC. But being in a household that does martial arts, training with your dad from a young age, it seems like, and training with guys like James Sahuna, it seems like you've got quite a bit of sparring experience working with top level athletes. Would you say that that's a sort of a deceiving point to you, that people sort of look at the amount of MMA fights that you have and sort of discount the fact that you sort of spent your whole life in mixed martial arts?
Yeah, definitely. I'd have to 100% agree with that. My record doesn't show I didn't have many fights. I've had a few amateur boxing fights as well before that, but it just happened that way. My dad didn't want me fighting at a younger age. I had a lot of karate tournaments, weapons, BJJ, but I just never got into the MMA until I was 18. I think I had my first amateur. So that's why, and then I broke my leg really badly, and then after that I sat out for I think 3 years, and then that's why the last 4 or 5 fights came pretty quick.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned your dad not wanting you to fight. Why didn't he want you to fight early? And also, being a guy who's a promoter and had an organization himself, was it sort of hard for him to eventually let you sort of go into fighting, knowing some of the hardships that a lot of fighters face?
Yeah, and I always joke about this because Dad originally wanted me to go to university, and when I told him that I wanted to fight for a living, I got a little bit beat up, but that's all. He always wanted me to go down the scholar road, and he knew how much I loved fighting, and I started amateur boxing once he let me, and that's just eventually how it happened. And then once he realized that, he does have what it takes to come in, then now he's really accepted it.
Wow. Do you guys ever look back on that and think about those conversations that you had, and then looking towards now that, I mean, you fight at UFC 209, you're going to be fighting in Vegas, the fight capital of the world?
Yeah, all the time. It was funny, last time my dad was just trying to hold the excitement in for the UFC, because once he realized that he knew that was my dream, and we were looking at each other going, we're here. There's a long road to go, but it was just that initial moment of, we've done something pretty good here.
Well, here you are now fighting Paul Craig at UFC 209. I mean, how do you feel about fighting in Vegas in just your second UFC fight?
Yeah, that's a big thing for me. Only a few weeks before the fight got announced, I told someone that has always been watching from a kid, watching people in Vegas, that's where I wanted to fight. And then for me to get that opportunity, when I got the call from my manager, I was like, man, this is all just one after another, ticking stuff off the bucket list. So, like I said, it doesn't change much because it's just another fight, but this is where I've always wanted to be, so I'm loving it.
Have you ever been to Vegas before? Like, not even in a fighting sense, even like in a holiday or anything like that? Have you ever made the trip?
Never. This will be my first time.
What a way to make your Vegas debut. I mean, do you have anything on a bucket list that you'll be looking to do while you're down there, maybe after you finish off with a fight?
No, not at all. I made sure that my ticket was booked for the next night. I don't need any of those crazy stories happening to me. Straight back to training for me.
All right. Well, it's good to hear, but at the same time, maybe in the future you'll have some more crazy stories. Wake up with a tiger in your bathroom or something like that. How's it going to feel for you having fellow adopted Aussie Mark Hunt there as well, competing with you on the same card?
Yeah, awesome. I can't wait. I've always wanted to be on with all the Pacific Islanders as well. I can't wait till my brother-in-law. That's the biggest point for me as well. I want to be on with Tyson Pedro, recently signed. That would have been the dream, but unfortunately, we're not looking till next year, I don't think. So that's really what I want to do, just be on with all the Pacific Islanders.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit about Ty, because for a lot of people, they don't actually know the relationship that's going on there between you two. Obviously, Ty was signed to the UFC recently, and he's a huge prospect in the heavyweight division. Talk to us a bit about your connection to him and the whole connection with your family. Yeah,
so he's just had they've recently, my sister and him have just really recently had a baby. So I've got my little nephew that I'm missing back in Australia. But he was signed a week before me after he beat James McSweeney. And then I found out he was the first one to call me and said, "How much do you love me?" And I go, "Oh, yeah, a little bit." And then they started laughing and he goes, "Well, I've got some news for you. Do you want to fight in Melbourne?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, what more card?" And he said the UFC, and I was like, "Bull crap." So he goes, "Call this number," and then I got in contact with my new manager then, and they told me, and that's how it all lined up. So Ty and I have been talking to each other about fighting since MSN days. He's known I've always wanted to fight, and I always knew he was a fighter. We used to joke about it, going, "We can't wait till we get to the top," and now we're both signed to the UFC. It's pretty surreal.
Wow. Started from the bottom and now you're here. Started on MSN and now you're here. We were actually watching Ty's fight with McSweeney last night, so we couldn't be happier for him. Let's talk about you and your opponent at UFC 209. How much do you know about Paul Craig?
Honestly, very little. I don't watch much tape. I'm going to start watching a bit more tape on him, but so far I just wanted to get over here and get my training in check. Just keeping all my stuff and making sure I'm sharp. But I've heard he's pretty good on the ground. I know he's got 9 submission wins. He's got some pretty crazy fans. They've already started hitting me up on Facebook, so it's good. At least they're getting behind their fighter.
What are they saying to you?
Oh, none of your training's going to count, stuff like that. So once the bear dude shakes a 0, so I like it. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, the crazy thing about you is, I mean, the thing that a lot of people say when they talk about you, Tyson, is the fact that you've got the strong mental game where you don't really overthink the fights before they happen. You don't worry too much before you go into the fight. You don't, like you mentioned, really focus on fight film too much. You sort of go in there and do your thing. Is that a little bit harder now that you've got all these people sort of going on Facebook, sending you these messages, and you're about to be in Vegas for the first time? Is it hard to stay in the same mental game?
No, I don't think so. I like that. That's why I think that's my thing. Just being able to not to let that sort of stuff affect you. Who knows? Maybe someone who's got Conor McGregor's mouth might be able to get me one day. But at the moment, I think I'm pretty good. I don't really mind people talking crap. Us Islanders, we always joke and talk crap to each other as well. So you can't really let anything affect you.
Much like yourself, Paul Craig's undefeated, and all of his wins have come by finishes. Is it safe to assume that this one probably won't be going to the distance?
I'd never want to go the distance. If I could do anything about it, I'd never want to really leave it in the hands of the judges. So I don't think so. I'll be surprised if it goes out of the first round.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that you haven't really seen too much on Paul Craig, but when you think about how this fight plays out and what happens in it, what's the scenario that comes to mind most often for you? What's the most likely way of victory for you come UFC 209?
I heard he said he got the submission of the night the other night, and he was looking for the knockout of the night. So if he's ready to stand and bang, I'll be happy with that.
Wow. Well, most importantly, Tyson, as we let you go, the most important question, come fight night, will you still enter the octagon to sexual by naked?
I'm not too sure. I've had quite a few ask me that. I've got a couple of songs in mind. I usually don't like walking out to the same song, but I like keeping it upbeat, so hopefully I'll have everyone singing again because that was the best.
Do you have a song that was in mind that you said, nah, it's not going to happen, that you can share with us? Something that was close to making it but sort of missed the cut by an ant's length?
On my last one, actually I can't even remember, but there's a few ones. I like trying to keep it a little bit sexual.
Is there anything that's can you share, like, what are the contenders at the moment? What songs are you considering? What's maybe the top 3, top 5?
I won't throw out the main ones just to get people, but I'll say we were driving today and Sexual Healing came on, and I was like, man, that'd be a good song to come out with.
Ooh, yes. And if that happened, would you want the crowd to sing along? Would that help on the night?
Everyone has to get behind the song.
Well, I mean, what's not to be excited about? I mean, Tyson Pedro making his Vegas debut, not just in the fight sense, but just in general. First time in Vegas, second fight in the UFC against an exciting fighter like Paul Craig. Guys, make sure to follow Tyson on Twitter at Tyson_Pedro. I mean, the fight's going down March 4th, 5th here in Australia, Las Vegas, Nevada. Mark Hunt is also in the card against Alistair Overeem. 2 title fights on there as well. It can't get any more exciting. The stakes can't be any more interesting. And Tyson, we can't wait to see what happens.
Can't wait to put on a show for all of you guys. Hope you're all watching.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
Well, guys, this is a treat. Our next guest is coming off a big win at Submission Undergrad 3. He now joins us to talk about the big win and what's next. Pablo himself, Dillon Danis, welcome back to Submission Radio. Good to have you on the show, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. It's good to be on.
Hey, it's an absolute pleasure. It's always great when you come on. Let's talk about Submission Underground 3, where you took on AJ Agazarm. You won. You beat him in overtime. How do you feel about the performance just days removed?
Yeah, I wasn't happy with my performance because I always look to go get the submission. But at the end of the day, I was happy because I went out there and I weathered his stalling storm and I still got the W. A lot of submission fighters go out there and they look for the submission, they get frustrated and they end up losing it and they end up not being able to win. So I was happy that I went out there and I showed them seasoned grappler and I could go and get that W no matter what. And since I was a kid, my first instructor taught me that if someone's sitting on their butt and it's telling you to come into their guard and you're backing away, that you're a pussy. So that's just how I see it. You know, I'm laying on my back and I'm saying, come here. Like, how are you going to back away from someone that's sitting on their butt? So that's how I feel about that.
We saw there was a nice photo with John Kavanagh. Talk to us a little bit about that. So he made it out down there and he was helping coach you in your corner for the event?
Yeah, John came out. He has the SPG headquarters is out there, so it was really cool for him to come out. All his friends were there. The whole SPG crowd was, all the SPG guys from the gym are there, you know. And, yeah, it's really cool to have him in the corner, and, you know, I respect him a lot. It's just a cool little combo. I like having him with me. He's a good coach and a good friend, and he's really cool to be around. And he's seen so many fighters before they fight and stuff. He just knows how to be around a fighter before a competition. He's just a really cool person to be around.
What is the vibe like with John? You mentioned that he's been, you know, he's obviously been a part of some of the biggest fights in the UFC as of late. What is the vibe like in sort of the dressing room before you go out? What does he say? And I guess what are the benefits of having him there?
He doesn't say too much. You know, he's very, you know, he caters to kind of however the guy is. You know, if I'm quiet, he's quiet. If I have some, like, you know, questions, he helps. But he's been in so many locker rooms that he just knows how to, you know, be around someone before they're about to go to war. So that's a good thing about him. He's seen every kind of type of person and stuff. So like I don't know how to explain it, but he's just really good at being like around me and stuff. So I like having him there. So people they're kind of bad to have around before you fight. You know, like there's all different kind of people. You know, the people that talk too much and the people that ask questions. So it's really cool to have someone that understands you.
Yeah, it's a rarity to find someone that meshes so well with you. Let's talk about your post-match speech. I mean, John Jones popped out once again. You called him a fucking bitch. What talk to us about? Was that a pre-planned thing, or did you just feel it after the match that it was the right moment, the right vibe to sort of put that one out?
Yeah, I mean, I said it because he called me a douchebag. You know, that's just how I felt. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who it is. They're all going to get it. I said that at Polaris. One by one, I'm going to get every one of them. So, yeah, at the end of the day, they're all going to get it. It doesn't matter who it is, but that's just how I felt at the moment.
You said on the show last time that you were going to leave John alone. You could see that, according to you, he didn't want to grapple you and you didn't want to bully him. When you called him that, was that because he's still angling for that match, or is it sort of more out of frustration that you think it's never going to happen?
I would say both. I mean, I feel like he might take it. I mean, I don't see why not. Yeah, and the people want it. Obviously, we've seen that everybody wants to see it. So, you know, I'll be here. It just has to come, you know, beg me. Like I said, you know, I'm the one that has the numbers. I'm the one that brings all the people to watch. So, in the grappling world at least. So he has to come and beg me.
I mean, Chael is the owner of Submission Underground. Did they say anything to you about John Jones? I mean, it seemed like that other plans for him, but they understand how much fans like to watch you, how much fans want to see this matchup. Did they mention anything at all to you after your match about, hey, this is still a possibility?
Yeah, from what I heard was that they told him about it and he just didn't want it. So in my eyes, I see fear. And then when someone doesn't want to fight someone, that's all fear. So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna leave him alone. I feel like I might be bullying him a little bit, so I'll leave the little guy alone for a little bit.
All right, well, let's talk about what's next. You've obviously got this big win against AJ Agazarm. Looks like the John Jones match isn't going to happen. So what is next? What are you planning on doing? Are you looking to get back into action straight away? Are you looking to take a bit of a break? What's going to happen now?
I'll probably get right back into it. I'll probably do Pan Ams and then Worlds and all these tournaments. And who knows, maybe MMA. I'm getting some big offers from big organizations, and I'm pretty close to taking one of them. So it's all about just like money right now and timing and everything, you know. But I mean, this is what I do. I go back I'm already training again and get right back into it.
Yeah, so I mean, last time you were on the program a few weeks ago, you mentioned these big organizations are approaching you. So is this a company outside the UFC that you're considering having your first pro fight with?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I heard Rory McDonald was saying some stuff about me, so I might go have to slap him up a little bit. So I'm thinking about doing that in Bellator, but, you know, just keep my options open.
Wow. So is it safe to say the Bellator, out of all these offers, is kind of the front runner?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say so. I like a lot of, you know, I mean, there's a lot of them, but I just like the idea because of what Rory McDonald was saying that jiu-jitsu guys are having these little, I don't know what he said, but you better watch what he says because then I'm going to come there and then we'll see what he says when I'm in there with him.
Wow, look at that. How long have these discussions with Bellator been going on? When did they originally contact you, Dillon?
I mean, it's just through negotiations with my manager and stuff. It's just like all just talk right now, you know. But trust me, I mean, like if I want to do it, I'll do it. So right now, it's just all negotiations.
Obviously, it's sort of, you know, early preliminary stages, but I guess one of the biggest questions that people have is, you know, you're a confident guy and people expect you to do very well in MMA, but when is that sort of going to happen? I understand, obviously, the negotiations are happening, but what is the rough period when you would want to make your MMA debut? It seems like it's going to be sometime this year, but when do you think it'll happen? Do you think it'll be in the first half of 2017?
I would think so. I mean, I still have some goals in jiu-jitsu, like the Worlds and Pan Ams, but like I said before, the money's right, I'll do it. It's the same thing with this Submission Underground thing. I took it because of the money, because I don't really like the rules necessarily, but, you know, money talks.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the Rory McDonald matchup would be something that would be very exciting for fans to watch. I mean, Rory, for a long time, considered one of the best welterweights around. How do you see that fight going down? I mean, you mentioned that he sort of put down jiu-jitsu fighters. Would you be looking to submit him in this one, or is there a different game plan that you have in mind?
I mean, that's what I'm going to do to every one of them. I'm going to try to take them down and submit them, and I feel like against anybody in the world, I'll do that. And, I mean, we've seen him against Damon Martin get taken down over and over again and pass pretty easily. So, I mean, if I get him down, it's over. So that's how I can see that fight going.
Wow. And while you're fielding all these offers and exploring your options, I'm wondering, did anything come from the UFC? Because you put it out there that you were considering fighting on the UFC London, maybe making your MMA debut. That card is getting a lot of notoriety recently with Jimmy Manuwa and Corey Anderson main eventing. A lot of people feeling like maybe they deserved a bigger matchup. Did the UFC contact you in any way after that and since we spoke last?
No, it hasn't. But, you know, if the people keep talking and the people want me to be on there, I mean, if the UFC calls, I would do it. So it's up to them.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy times right now in this world of MMA. Now, we want to do a thing with you, Dillon, where we get to know you a little bit better. It's called the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. But before we jump to that, I just want to ask you a couple of questions on some other crazy stuff that's been happening this week. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing all the stuff about Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather. Obviously, we saw he did an interview with Ariel Helwani in an iPay-per-view, and also Mayweather's been going around saying that he wants to do this fight. What are your thoughts on McGregor taking on Mayweather?
I think Conor beats him. I think Conor will be very unorthodox in there, and I think that Floyd's used to fighting a boxer or a boxing style. If you look at it, the guys that give him trouble, like Maidana and like Mosley, is because they're a little bit unorthodox and scrappy. And Conor can, you know, Conor's not the same kind of look as he's going to be used to, and I think Conor will be able to beat him. And I stand behind Conor 100% if he fights him.
Is it a situation for you? Because, I mean, we've been talking to people, we've spoken to people from the boxing world, we've spoken to MMA fans, and it's another sort of situation where fans are, severely underestimating Conor McGregor. A lot of people feel like Floyd Mayweather is going to go in there and sort of destroy him in the opening moments of the fight. Do you think the whole underdog status is possibly a good thing for McGregor going into this fight, considering the fact that he kind of has been an underdog into a lot of fights that he's gone into?
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of people haven't seen him spar with boxers, with Olympic boxers, with professional boxers, and I have, so I know what he's capable of, and I think he would surprise a lot of people.
All right, Dillon. Well, we're going to do something fun with you. It's called the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. We haven't done this in a long time, but I mean, given the fact that you are a BJJ star, we figured we'd bring it back. So the way it works is it's kind of almost like a word association where we throw something fun at you, and you give us the first answer that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, so nice and easy to start off with. Your biggest Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu inspiration. Who would you say that is?
I would say my coach, Marcelo Garcia.
One song you can't stop playing on repeat in your headphones right now.
Bad and Bougie.
TV show that you could watch over and over again, Dillon.
Narcos.
If there was a movie based on your life, who's playing the lead, the love interest, and the bad guy?
That's a hard one.
I know, that's the one that always knocks people off. Yeah.
My love interest.
This is like a
can
freebie. You can look at any hot actress, and she can basically be the Dillon Danis love interest. Anyone you've had your eye on for a while.
Okay, it doesn't have to be an actress.
No.
It can be anyone.
Okay, so I would say Bella Hadid. And then,
yeah.
And then for the bad guy, it'd probably be... I don't even know. That's like a hard one. What actor? Who's a bad guy?
What about Christoph Waltz? Christoph Waltz. He was the Nazi in Inglourious Bastards, and he was the bad guy in James Bond. How about him?
He's cool, yeah. Or James Franco he was in Spider-Man. I like James Franco.
Okay, James Franco. Yeah. A bit younger, yeah. And who's playing Dillon Danis in a movie? Who's good enough to play you?
That's a rough one. That'd be a hard role.
Denzel Washington's always a good option.
Denzel Washington, he's a legend. So, let's see. You know who I like? My favorite actor is Ben Stiller, so I'll just go with Ben Stiller.
Yeah, I could see him growing out a beard, so that would work. I also see Denzel Washington playing you in a movie. It'd be like Pablo, the Dillon Danis story, and then it cuts to the trailer. It's like, okay. You got Dillon, you got Denzel Washington.
Shoe program, 24-hour lockdown.
That's the kid from the movie, the girl next door, Emily, Emila.
Yeah. What is her name?
Alpha Dog.
Alicia Cuthbert, is that it?
No, the guy, the kid.
Oh, the guy? I don't remember.
Yeah, the guy from Alpha Dog.
Justin Timberlake?
No, the main actor.
Emil Hirsch?
Emil Hirsch. Yeah, I feel like he would be a good for me.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. That works. I saw Alpha Dog the other day, actually, so yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, moving on. If Dillon Danis is making dinner for a hot date, what's the go-to meal?
Ooh. Yeah, I don't cook, so I'll just order. I would order out.
Where are you ordering out? Is it Burger King for the date, or are you going to the extra lengths? Take out lobster.
If it was a romantic date, I would probably get her something special, something like sushi or something. Play some games, make it romantic.
I like it. Tell us, Dillon, best video game of all time.
Well, that's a hard one. I'll say Call of Duty.
Which one? Because there's been some crappy ones and some good ones.
I like Call of Duty 4.
Call of Duty 4? Yes, I think that was the first Modern Warfare, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll win a lot of fans with that one. Favorite submission from the Dillon Danis playbook?
I'll say guilty. So I catch all the bums with.
That's a good line.
Strangest place you've worn your SUG belt?
The strip club.
Did you really wear it to the strip club?
No, I left that home. But...
You should have lied and told us you did. That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
How quickly would you tap Brendan Schaub in an MMA fight?
30 seconds.
Wow, now we've got a definitive answer. Finally, Dillon.
I'd knock him out in 20, though, so let's be honest.
Finally, Dillon, you're stuck on a desert island and you can only bring 3 things or people with you. Who and what do you choose? Be careful here because you'll be stuck with them forever.
Oh, it's a fucking ball's name from Castaway. Spalding.
The ball's name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it Wilson?
It's Wilson. Yeah.
Wilson?
I'll bring Wilson. Probably bring. Oh, you guys are killing me with these questions. This is so random.
You can do like a Wilson trifecta, Wilson Reyes and Owen Wilson.
Wilson and then probably like I'll just say 2 girls, probably.
All right, 2 girls. 2 girls, and there will be auditions held for who makes the cut. But there you go, guys. Dillon Danis, once again, a lot of fun at Submission Radio. We're very excited to see what's next. Obviously, you guys have to follow Dillon on Instagram at Dillon Danis, and don't be fooled, it is Pablo on there, but you are following the right man. So we're excited to see whether your next escapade will be in BJJ or in MMA, maybe even a Bellator. But thank you so much for your time, Dillon. It's always fun having you on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Hey, this is Ariel Helwani, and you're listening to Submission Radio with my 2 favorite mates, Dennis and Casper.
All right, guys. Our next guest is one half of one of the best gyms in the entire sport, Jackson Winkeljohn. He trains the best fighters in the world on a daily basis, guys like Cowboy Cerrone, John Jones, Carlos Condit, Alistair Overeem, and of course, Holly Holm. Coach Mike Winkeljohn, welcome back to Submission Radio. How's it going today?
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Well, the pleasure's all ours, Mike. And I mean, earlier on in the episode, we were very lucky to talk to Tyson Pedro, who touched down in your gym earlier this month. I mean, a lot of Aussies pretty excited about Tyson Pedro fighting UFC 209. Big win here at UFC Melbourne.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. Tyson, wow, what a great addition to come down to the gym and help others. I mean, he's down here right away helping everybody else out. And so I've worked with him a little bit. I want to start working with him a lot more. I think you guys got great talent there in that young man.
Did you see how he got into the UFC and the amount of fights that he had to get into the UFC, Mike? Because his story is actually really, really interesting. I mean, he took a big break from fighting. He grew up in a family full of fighters and ended up sort of taking this fight last minute in the UFC Melbourne, winning it, and now being on a huge card. Before he actually fought in the UFC, he only had 4 professional fights, and most of those fights happened in 1 year, in 2016. So he had 3 fights in 2016, and his 4th one was in the UFC. Before that, he only fought once in 2013. I mean, it's just a remarkable story.
Yeah, it's a great story. You know what? I can see why it was possible, though, because I think he's a tremendous athlete, and even more important, he's very intelligent, and he studies the game, and he learns, and he's willing to learn new things and watch people and study people. So I can see him being a great student of the game, which is going to, of course, turn him into a great fighter.
Well, I mean, that's what you guys do. That's what you're known for. And obviously, you've had a lot of amazing fighters walk through those doors of your gym. You've molded a lot of champions. What do you sort of see in terms of potential when you look at him and see what he brings? Have you had a chance to sort of, think about how high that ceiling is for a guy like Tyson and what you can do with him in the future?
Well, I think Tyson can go all the way. There's no doubt about it. If he's serious about it, he's explosive enough. He's fast enough. I've seen him get cracked and keep fighting. Not that I want to see him get hit ever again, but I think he's got a lot of potential. I think the top, he can break that ceiling. I think he can make it all the way to the title.
And I know it's a question that you may get here and there from the Aussies, but did he bring any Vegemite with him, and has he tried to get you to try something? Because this is a very interesting thing that a spreadable that you can try from Australia.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, every time I've been to Australia, people try to get me to try it, and I go out of my way not to, because I know it's all about laughing at the face I make when I try it. So, no, he did not bring any, as far as I know, for me, and no, I did not try any, thank goodness.
If you haven't seen him bring it, it probably just means he's waiting for the right moment to spring it on you. Bit of advice: very, very thin spread on a piece of toast, and add a bit of cheese, and you'll be in heaven, Coach. I guarantee you. Let's talk about this past weekend, specifically Donald Cerrone's loss to Jorge Masvidal. We noticed a familiar face missing. Any particular reason why we didn't see you in Cowboy's corner for the fight?
Oh, you know what? I'd rather not talk about his fight. How come you have to talk about the ones we lose? You know what? Cowboy's an anomaly in that Cowboy works out a lot up on his ranch out of town, and so he's got Brandon Gibson, one of our coaches here, is willing to make the drive every day to work out with Cowboy. I'm not the guy that's going to make that drive. He's on the team. He's a great individual, but he's got his way of doing things, and he's got a great team of guys around him. And being that Brandon was working with him every day, there's absolutely no reason for me to be in his corner because Brandon knows him better, and they've kind of clicked. In fact, Brandon Gibson has helped him a little bit. You wouldn't have noticed it by his last fight, but a lot with getting him a little bit more head movement, a little bit more with using his athleticism. This fight for Cowboy was just, he wasn't himself by any means. Masvidal got in his face, and so Cowboy got irritated and mad about it in that he wanted to stand there and show he's a tough guy. And Cowboy needs to go out there and have fun and do what he wants to do, and he can beat anybody in the world.
I mean, what did you think about the knockdown at the end of the first round, and where do you stand on it? Did you think the fight should have been stopped?
You know what? It's a tough one, because I have seen Cowboy come back before in the past. He's as tough as they come, and I thought when they showed the replay, it did look to me like the bell rang. I won't lie. It did sound like the bell rang after Herb Dean called it off. But here's the deal. If it's real loud in there and Herb can't hear the bell and somebody tells him, hey, the bell went, well, it puts him in a weird place. So I can't go back to that decision. I was worried about Donald. He was a little bit on Queer Street. There's no doubt about it. But Greg was in the corner with him there, and Greg asked some questions. And we want to give our fighters every opportunity to come back, and he has done it before.
We didn't hear anything from Cowboy after the fight. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we want to touch on this with you, Mike. Hopefully we can just a little bit because a lot of fans are wondering, what was it like backstage and how did he take the loss?
Oh, you know what? There wasn't much conversation between myself and Cowboy. Greg talked to him a little bit about what he thinks Cowboy needs to work on in the future. Most of the team was kind of quiet because everybody was depressed by the moment because everybody believed, as I did, that Cowboy would win this fight. I really thought he would front kick Masvidal in the belly a lot, and I thought really he'd beat him with leg kicks. And eventually, of course, that would be lure in people's hands and do what Cowboy does and kick him in the head. But there wasn't a lot of talk, just a lot of bummed out in the situation and get through the moment. And then I'm sure he will sit down with Greg and Jafari Veneer and Brandon Gibson and talk about what he needs to do to get back up on his horse and keep going.
I mean, one of the big things that people have been talking about with this fight is the fact that he took the fight with a quick turnaround, fighting only a month and a half earlier. Also, an opponent that maybe doesn't have the biggest name value. What do you think about him taking the fight so quickly? And in hindsight, do you think, I mean, I know you're a fan of him staying active, but do you think it's a little bit too quick, a little bit too much?
I actually don't think that played out in the fight. I don't think it was because he took the fight too soon. I don't think that was it at all. I think he was fighting at home in front of the Denver crowd, and he got a little amped up because of it, and it's happened to a lot of our fighters. I think a little bit had to do with fighting at home. I think a little bit had to do with Masvidal just bringing it to him. Masvidal fought at a very high level. You can't take anything away from Masvidal for what he did. He beat Donald, so you got to give him credit for just stepping up and having that day.
And Masvidal looked great doing it. It seemed like the title shot was just within grasp for Cowboy at welterweight, which is why this one would have been a bit of a tough loss. Is that still the goal, the title? And is it pretty much a given that Donald will stay at 170 for his next fight?
Well, I don't know. I would think so. Donald seems so much more comfortable there. What I've noticed on the outside, he's not having to struggle with weight cut by any means, and we know he's got the power. His problem wasn't the size by any means. It was just the style of fight. So, and that won't change if he went back down to 155. So I like him at 170. I think he can win the world title at 170. And before this fight, I thought for sure he was going to win it in 2017. So I would sure like to see him get back out here, on his way toward his title in 2017.
I feel like a bit of a negative Nancy here, Coach, and I apologize for it. But before we move on to Holly, I just want to get a quick update on Andrei Arlovski. How's he doing, and is he okay after his loss on Saturday night?
Well, that is a negative Nancy. You know what, Andre? What sucks? He feels absolutely terrible. He didn't do we all didn't do what we wanted to do game plan wise, and that was not stop our punching and come into the range of his counter punches, his long counter punches. You can see it playing out the wrong way if he didn't do what he needed to do, and that's what it was. And it's easy for me and for the other coaches to say these things sitting on the outside because we don't have this 6'5" genetic nightmare throwing these big bombs at us. Francis is just a fantastic athlete, and you have to be on your game 100% to beat him. Andre just didn't quite do what we needed to do. I think we didn't do enough reps, so we all failed on that one. And it's kind of heartbreaking because Andre Arlovsky is one of my favorite guys in the world. He's just a truly great character, pain in the ass, charismatic, sarcastic. He's just one of the funnest guys in the gym.
And he's always spoken very positively about you, and it seems like you've got something special. He's always said that on this show as well. Last question on Andre, and then we're moving on. The statistics, if you look at him, 3 of his last 4 losses have come via TKO. I'm not sure where Andre stands as far as career longevity, but as a coach, is that in any way a concern for you? Are you at that stage or tempted to speak to a fighter like Andre about how many more times he can take such a risk?
Well, I'm going to tell you what. When he first came to camp, Greg Jackson had a talk with him, and Greg says, Andre's coming to camp. And I said, are you kidding? That guy can't take a punch anymore. I was wrong. Greg had confidence in it. He seemed to come here. He listened. He changed his style a little bit, and he went on this gigantic winning streak. And so every one of his losses as of recent are just inches. Everything's just small. I mean, he was doing so great in the Barnett fight and got caught. Just little things. Stipe, well, guess what? The guy hits hard, and these heavyweights hit. Everybody's 1 inch away or one fraction of a second away from getting knocked out at heavyweight. With Andre's style, because he likes to box and stand up so much, it's going to be that style. I think his game has the ability to do a lot more wrestling, and for him to get back into the swing of things, I think he'll be doing a lot more wrestling in the future just to mix things up, and I think he's not done yet.
Maybe another comeback around the corner. Let's look forward to UFC 208, where Holly Holm takes on Jermaine Dirandami for the inaugural UFC featherweight belt. How do you feel about Holly going up in weight? Is this something you've wanted to see for a while?
You know what? I never knew it was going to be an option. Holly's always boxed at higher weights. She's always boxed at 140 or 147 or even 154. So going weight wasn't really the issue, but it was never offered. Weight cuts have been kind of hard for us before in the past, I won't lie. But, Holly's just very strong, and she's very determined. And she's embarrassed by her last outing, and she wants to get back to the top. Miesha Tate was one of those fights that, she did great. It was just one, she got taken down, and she just lack of focus for just a second. And Miesha is relentless with what she does. She's just great. With Shevchenko, we all see how good she is after watching her with Pena, but, Holly just had a bad fight. And in some ways, I probably shouldn't let her fight because there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. But there's no excuses for this one. She's all in, and she'll be victorious.
And much like the Andre fight you mentioned, it is sort of a game of inches in Holly's losses. There have been, very, very close calls. Are you guys doing anything differently to make sure that Holly is in the perfect mindset and to sort of get out of this 2-fight skid and to make sure that she shows up at her best at UFC 208?
Oh yeah. We've changed some things, quite a few things behind the scenes. So I think we'll see an even new and improved Holly Holm, even better. I mean, you think with all the fights she has, boxing and MMA wise, that you're gonna get the same Holly Holm, but she's got some tricks up her sleeve people haven't seen.
Well, Jermaine is a former kickboxing and Muay Thai world champion. What kind of challenges do you see her presenting to Holly, and where do you think Holly can sort of beat her in this kind of matchup?
Oh, first off, you said it. She's a world champion, undefeated kickboxer, Muay Thai fighter. So she can bang and she can come forward. She can pressure you. She hits hard, and she's very strong in the clinch. She will throw hard knees, and they have made a difference in her fight. I know she's working on wrestling every day, so I expect a little bit of that in the fight as well. I think that the difference is going to be, Holly's ability to change the fight depending on the situation. Holly's got a lot of experience with movement and motion, and I think that she's a superior athlete.
You mentioned how there were things going on behind the scenes that are now no longer a problem. And you also mentioned the cut, that it was a pretty hard one to 135. What differences are you seeing in the gym with Holly not having a cut down to 135 anymore? And do you think the cut ever took away from her performances in the past?
I'm not going to say it took away from it. I know it was just hard mentally. Physically, she could always do extra rounds. After Misha Tate, she could have got up and done extra 2 rounds. And that was actually a very hard cut. So I'm not sure if physically did as much as sometimes mentally and lack of focus. But in the gym now, she's almost always has a smile on her face. Every day is a good day. She's not as grumpy from worrying about her weight. So that's nice, because there's always that fear of worried about. There's 2 fights out there, making weight first and then the fight. Now she only has 1 fight to worry about.
We know you and Holly like a good challenge. How important do you think it is for her to fight Chris Cyborg? And given that she's the current Invicta featherweight champion, do you sort of feel like Holly needs to beat Cyborg to cement herself as the most dominant woman at featherweight if she does get past Jermaine at UFC 208?
Oh, yes and no. If Cyborg can get off suspension for doing what she's done, which is obvious. Holly never turned down a fight before in her life. In fact, we offered to fight Cyborg. She turned it down. So that's where we're at right now. So that's not an issue for Holly Holm. She just wants to get the title right now with Jermaine.
Holly's also made it clear that she wants to win the bantamweight belt back. Is that something that you've wanted to see happen again, especially considering, the storied way in which she won it originally and how much of a monumental moment it was for Jackson Winkeljohns?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. We can't lose focus where we're at. But, she wants to go back and get what she lost, what we lost by messing up on a few things. But, that's down the road, and can't lose focus on the most important thing she has right now, which is Jermaine.
The interesting story here, Coach, is the fact that Holly wants to move down and claim the bantamweight belt, while Amanda Nunes wants to move up and claim the featherweight belt. Theoretically, it's a race to see who can move weight classes first. What do you think should happen, and what do you think about this kind of situation?
Oh, I think it all comes down to the right time, the right place for both of them. There's no doubt. I think Shevchenko needs to get a shot at Amanda Nunes first, just time frame wise. I think the best way to sell that between the 2 division champions would be for each one to have another fight, so they can start marketing it that way more. The immediate thing is tough. I mean, Holly, after Holly wins the belt, I think I'd like to see her defend it, once before she goes back and tries to get the 135-pound title.
Have you sort of thought about the fact that currently in the division, I mean, we don't really know who's in the UFC's featherweight division, and like you mentioned, Cyborg's on suspension. Well, not necessarily suspension, but, and again, I don't want to get too far ahead, but have you thought about sort of the landscape and things like that?
Yeah, you know what, we do kind of think about her manager and I, Lenny Fresquez, have thought a little bit about, gosh, who would be next?
Yeah.
But I haven't really dug into it. I'm trying to figure out who are the girls that have had hard cuts in the past, who are the biggest girls out there, and who can come in from the outside. So you're right. Who knows who's in the 145-pound division at the moment, other than Chris Cyborg. But I'm sure a lot of girls would love to fight at 145.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the official, I guess, top 10 is eventually going to look like in that division. While we're talking about big fights and what's happening for Holly Holm, you said last year that you were hoping Ronda Rousey would beat Nunes to set up the big rematch with Holly. What was your reaction to that fight, and how disappointed are you that fight, well, it kind of looks like it may never happen?
Oh, yeah, I can't see it happening now. It just absolutely can't happen. I think Holly broke her. I think Ronda was on top of the world, and Holly broke her. Because when she came out for Amanda, she just wasn't the same fighter by any means. I'm not taking anything away from Amanda. But Ronda she didn't have anything. It just wasn't there. She was just basically waiting for the end. In essence, once she couldn't find a way to grab her, and she did the same thing she'd done before in the past, reaching out with the left arm and trying to corral. It was just one-sided fight. Just like I said, just I think she's done.
Do you sort of take that from a coach's perspective as almost like a feather in the cap? Because, this time last year, the year before that, Ronda Rousey was on top of the world. It seemed almost like an unclimbable mountain. And then you and the coaching staff at Jackson Winkeljohns are responsible for pretty much everything that followed afterwards. And, there's so many legacies with Jackson Winkeljohns like John Jones and so many other previous champions. But do you feel like that's a big feather in the cap, in the legacy of Jackson Winkeljohns?
Well, yeah, it's definitely a feather in the cap, but we can't take the credit for it. It's mostly Holly. She came to fight that night, and she listened to the game plan, and she followed through. So, kind of how lucky we are that she gave us the opportunity to have such a great night.
Well, it looks like another great night is on its way. I mean, what's the prediction here? How do you think Holly gets it done on March 4th against Jermaine to become UFC's first featherweight champion?
I think Holly's going to, wear her down and keep breaking her down. Holly's never been known for her one-punch power. She's been known for her kick power. Jermaine keeps her hands up very well. So it's going to be one of those things, breaking that body down, and eventually catching her or something. So, my prediction is Holly stops her, by the fourth round. It's going to be a little later in the fight, but by the fourth round.
Well, there you go. It's going to be an amazing clash of styles. Potentially, I know you're very confident, but it looks like another title heading on its way to Jackson Winkeljohns. UFC 208 takes place on February 11th. It's going to be the February 12th here in Australia, in Brooklyn, New York, for anybody who's lucky enough to be local around there. Don't forget to follow Coach Wink on Twitter at MMA Coach Wink. A lot of good stuff and quality content on there. And Mike, we always love having you on the show. Thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate it.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on.
Hey guys, this is Brian Stan. You're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is an MMA legend and a previous UFC light heavyweight and heavyweight champion. You also know him from such movies as The Expendables, Scorpion King 2, Big Stan. He joins us here back on the program. The natural Randy Couture. Welcome back to Submission Radio. It's been a while, man.
It has been a while. How you guys been?
Very good, very good. Missing you with every day, Randy. And we saw on Instagram that you got back on the saddle the other day. You went on a bit of a horse ride with some friends. Talk to us about your horse riding skills, because we're imagining backflips and riding on two horses at once when seeing you riding around. Is that an accurate assessment?
No, absolutely not. I'm doing my best to keep my ass in the saddle. I love horses. When I left Oregon 10 years ago, I sold my horses and my trailer and all my stuff. I kept my saddles and all that, but I absolutely miss my horses. They're a very relaxing thing. And now I end up on a motorcycle instead of a horse. I kind of do the same thing, to unplug and unwind. And there's something about having the wind in your face and the sun in your back that makes the rest of the world go away. So, but I definitely miss the personality of my horses.
We also saw on Instagram that a week ago you met with some more members of Congress in D.C. First off, we noticed you were wearing an impressive scarf to the meeting with a nice shade of green and some sort of reddish color. Was the scarf a sneaky persuasion tool for the meeting, Randy? Be honest with us.
Well, the scarf is actually a really cool scarf. It's a flag. It's the American flag, kind of subdued with military green and then red and blue with white stars. But it's a little more subdued than the regular flag. And I wouldn't want to wear that around my neck anyway. But but I don't know. I guess I'm a scarf guy. I don't know what to tell you. I wear them a lot, especially in the winter. It was cold as heck in D.C. when we were there, so the scarf worked for me.
Yeah, we respect it. So in all seriousness, though, how did it go? And are there any updates, especially from your meeting from Congress?
Again, the second trip out with the MMAFA, the Fighters Association, and very well received with all the congressmen on both sides of the aisle. It's pretty much an easy sell when you got guys like myself, John Fitch, Ben Askren, all there speaking to congressmen, letting them know what our real world, real experience has been with the contracts, with dealing with the promotions in mixed martial arts and the flaw that is the system being used right now, and why the Ollie Act needs to be expanded to include combative sports athletes. We picked up 8 sponsors for the bill. 2 of them Democratic. Obviously, Joe Kennedy has been one of the founding members of the bill with Mark Wayne Mullins from Oklahoma. Those two guys have kind of spearheaded this whole thing. So we have six Republican sponsors now and 2 Democratic sponsors, a couple more Democratic sponsors that we spoke with that I think are going to sign on as well. There's no opposition from anyone to get through what used to be called the Energy and Commerce Committee. They've changed the name now, but without anybody kind of being opposed to this thing, it may get suppressed and put on the fast track to get to a vote sooner than we expected originally, which is all good news.
Mm-mm. I mean, a lot of people listening right now, they don't really understand how it all works. And it's fascinating, the process that it has to go through. But, I mean, for someone who's listening right now, who's wondering, well, how soon can it be? I mean, can it be a thing that comes through at some point this year, or do you think it's still something that's a couple of years away?
Well, we expected it would probably take it at least until June, especially with the transition going on. But obviously the transition's moving faster than people expected. Again, with the chairman, the vice chairman, and the senior member not opposing the language in the bill and what we're trying to do, that gives it an opportunity to be fast-tracked. So we're potentially looking within the next 2 to 3 months that we'll get this to a vote instead of waiting 6 months till June. Once it's in a vote, there'll be a transition. If it obviously gets approved, there'll be a transition period for the sport. It doesn't happen overnight. You're not just going to flip a switch and change the system overnight. It's going to take some time to transition and comply basically with the federal legislation. And I don't know how much you guys know or understand what's going on, but the flaw basically that's being used in mixed martial arts is that the promoter and the sanctioning body in mixed martial arts are the same person. It's a lot of power. It definitely skews the leverage and power in favor of the promoter, who is also the sanctioning body setting up the rankings and the titles that we as athletes, hoped and aspire to fight for. That leverage and power allows them to sign fighters to very exclusive, very limiting contracts, signing away their ancillary rights and many other things in perpetuity forever, that normally under the Ali Act with boxing would not be allowed. So that's the biggest thing that the Ali Act does for us as mixed martial artists. Is it changes that structure. It separates those powers.
I'm wondering, Randy, how much... I can't imagine you walking anywhere near the UFC and really having conversations, but what do you think the UFC thinks about this? Because from everything that we know about the Ali Act, it would completely change the UFC's business practices. What do you think's going through their mind as this Ali Act sort of seems to be nearing?
It wouldn't just change the UFC's business practices. It would change the business practices for the entire sport.
Sure, yeah.
All the promotions are using the same flawed system. And I mean, yeah, again, I think if it gets passed, there's going to be a transition period where the promotions are going to have to decide whether they want to remain a sanctioning body that sets rankings and titles, or if they want to be a promoter that promotes fighters to fight for those rankings and titles. And it would then the change would create an open, competitive market. Right now, it's a very closed, anti-competitive market. 90% of the funds that are generated in our sport right now are coming through the UFC. So obviously, they don't want to see this change. They've had a license to basically print money off the backs of fighters since 2000, since the last 16 years. Certainly, the new owners maybe didn't understand or didn't see what was potentially coming, but I absolutely believe the Fertittas knew what was coming with the class action lawsuit, and then now the fighters uniting with the Fighters Association and trying to get the Ali Act amended to protect us like it does boxers. So I'm sure it's got to be concerning to them. They are lobbying. They've hired lobbyists, and my understanding is they've spent over $1 million with lobby groups trying to shut this down and trying to spin it and convince people that it doesn't need to be changed, that it should just stay the same. which in my opinion is a lot tougher position to sell. But, it's going to be an interesting year for sure.
I mean, a big moment last year was when you gave a testimonial at the congressional subcommittee hearing on MMA. And according to Markwayne Mullin, who's the congressman sponsoring the Muhammad Ali Act, Expansion Act, the UFC tried to influence a congressional committee to blackball you from speaking at the hearing. I mean, was it a relief that you got an opportunity to do the testimonial? And also, how hard was it for you to do? I mean, it's a big pressure situation to be in that position and giving a testimony like that.
Well, it was certainly a bit nerve-wracking. I jokingly said afterwards, I think I'd rather be punched in the face. But they definitely tried to influence the committee and said that they weren't going to attend if I was allowed to speak. Obviously, the committee wasn't swayed by that. They were there. They did speak about their drug testing programs and the health and safety measures that they take for athletes in the sport, which are all, big concerns, certainly with all the things going on with traumatic brain injury and CTE and those sorts of things through football and some of the other contact sports. MMA is certainly not exempt from those concerns, but I was allowed to speak. I felt, good about it. I think it was well received on both sides of the issue, or for Republicans and Democrats alike. Seem to understand where we're coming from, why we feel like this needs to happen, and create a free and open competitive marketplace for us as mixed martial artists. Give us a little more leverage to negotiate our value in the marketplace, which are all things that don't happen right now in mixed martial arts. Probably the guy that's holding the UFC's feet to the fire the most right now is Conor McGregor. And it's interesting that he and Nate Diaz have just gone out and gotten boxing licenses in the state of California. When I got my first mixed martial arts professional license, it assigned me a national number. The same thing happens with boxers. The difference is when Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor got their boxing licenses, that national number assigned them protections that are granted boxers under the Muhammad Ali Act. Mm-hmm. I can guarantee you that both Conor McGregor and Diaz signed a contract that specifically forbids them from boxing, grappling, or wrestling in any other show without express consent from the UFC. So right away, by getting a boxing license, they created a conflict for the UFC in that their contract is basically illegal under the Ali Act protections.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you bring up Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. John S. Nash of Bloody Elbow wrote a really good article last year, basically giving the blueprint to how Conor McGregor can use that Ali Act to get around his UFC contract and, fight Mayweather, because while both Nate and Conor have boxing license, or Nate's on the way, Mayweather is the big fight. There's a few things that McGregor has to do, and going off his article, he's got to apply for that boxing license, which he's done. Second was to announce the fight, preferably do it in California or New York. And then thirdly, he's got to immediately file for declaratory relief against the UFC side of the Muhammad Ali Reform Boxing Act's provision against coercive contracts, to make the claim that the restrictive provision in the UFC's contract is restraining McGregor from boxing, and that he's a licensed boxer under an applicable boxing commission failing under jurisdiction in the ABC. Bit of a mouthful, but that's basically from John S. Nash. This could be a really costly process, but do you think McGregor will be able to pull it off? And knowing what you know about the UFC, do you think they will, rather than having the risk of him doing this by himself, do you think they'll try and attach their trailer and just say, look, we'll just all do this together?
I mean, we've already seen a complete 180 from Dana. Rather than fighting Conor, where he was stripped of his 145-pound title and even dropped out of the top 10 rankings in that weight class, having not lost a fight, I think was backlash for his public voice about the boxing match. We've already seen Dana do a complete 180, and now he's offering both Mayweather and McGregor significant amounts of money to be involved and promote that boxing match. So I think Nash's estimation is exactly right, which is exactly why this is helping our movement, what we're trying to do on the federal legislative level with the Ali Act. I think the one issue that McGregor is going to have is that he has no real boxing experience. He's a mixed martial artist. So finding a commission that is going to be willing to sanction him to fight arguably the best boxer in the world right now in Floyd Mayweather is going to be a problem. It's one thing to have a guy like James Toney get licensed in mixed martial arts, even though he had no real mixed martial arts background, which happened. Obviously, I fought him in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody sanctioned that event. I think James wasn't exactly, and nor was I, the number one guy in my weight class at that time. So maybe it was a little easier to sell. I think it's a little tougher to sell Mayweather-McGregor with McGregor's boxing experience. And it would be tougher to sell Mayweather-McGregor in a mixed martial arts competition to get Mayweather licensed and sanctioned that event in mixed martial arts. So that, I think, is the hurdle, is finding the commission that's going to be willing to sanction that fight and make it happen.
Do you think, I mean, Conor McGregor spoke recently in that 1 hour long pay-per-view Q&A where he seems to have come to some kind of understanding with the Nevada State Athletic Commission. He brings up points about how much money he brings into the state. Do you think that's something that might outweigh the negatives of Conor McGregor having such low experience in boxing? And there have been other commissions that have basically welcomed Conor McGregor. I'm not sure whether it was Nevada or New York, but others have welcomed him with open arms and said they'd be glad to, give him a license and put together a big fight.
Yeah, well, and the question is, okay, not whether they'll let him box. I think they will let him box. Are they going to let him box Floyd Mayweather? That's the fight everybody wants to see. That's the fight he's pushing for. And I guess that's the question in my mind. Yeah, absolutely. Any place that is willing to hold that boxing or MMA match, any city is going to reap the rewards and the benefits of all the people that come and all the, the hotels and all the other stuff that surrounds a mixed martial arts fight. That's one of the reasons why we'd like to see the All Act amended as well. Create an open market where these other promotions now that are basically bringing in 10%, maybe a little bit more of the revenue that comes in our sport, they don't have access to the top fights or can't even negotiate to promote those top fights and those top fighters to fight each other because they're all signed to exclusive contracts with the UFC. Imagine if it was an open market and it went to the highest bidder and it was a transparent market where they have to disclose how much money they made the last time I fought. Now I know what my value is, and I can say as a fighter, okay, you guys made this amount of money the last time we did this together. I want a little bit bigger piece of the pie. I want a little bit more of a percentage and make it a little more fair when we go and do this big fight. And we're both still going to make money, but I'm going to make a lot more than 10 or 13% of whatever comes in on that event as the athlete stepping up in the cage.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating time to be in the sport. Just quickly before we move on, I mean, we all remember that fight with James Toney that you had in the UFC when he came into MMA. How do you think McGregor's foray into boxing goes? Because some are saying he has a puncher's chance. Others are saying this will be a quick and brutal destruction by Floyd Mayweather. Where do you kind of sit on this whole thing?
Well, I think anybody that's a game fighter, and Conor McGregor is certainly a game fighter, has a puncher's chance. James Toney had a puncher's chance going into a mixed martial arts engagement with me. I wasn't silly enough to stand around in front of James or take James's skills for granted. He's a very, very, very good boxer. But I didn't think he could stop a low single, and it was then a question of how much did he learn in the weeks and months leading up to that fight on the ground outside of his realm of expertise. Now, there are not too many boxers in the world in the last 10 years that have been able to touch Floyd Mayweather. It is a bit crazy to think that Conor McGregor, as a mixed martial artist, not being able to kick, elbow, use clinch and dirty boxing tactics in a straight boxing match, is going to be able to go out against Floyd Mayweather and be any more successful than anybody else in the boxing world has been. So I think it's probably, certainly has, like I said, a puncher's chance. Everybody has that. In Conor's game, he's going to get in there and do it. So there's always that possibility, but rational thought will tell you that it's probably going to be a long night for Conor.
Well, regardless, if it does happen, hopefully everybody's going to walk away very rich. Randy, while we're talking about, obviously, issues with contracts, we wanted to touch on Mark Hunt's lawsuit against the UFC, Dana White, and Brock Lesnar. It's a pretty curious situation, especially with him competing at UFC 209. Given your experience with, obviously, lawsuits in the UFC and things like that, what do you think about Hunt's move to do this, and do you think he'll have any success?
Well, certainly it's a civil suit, and the civil law is a little bit different than them arguing over a contract. There's a little more leniency in the civil courts, and it's actually reasonable. And I think with timing of when things went public and what they knew when they knew it, which is what Mark's complaint is, that they knew Brock Lesnar was dirty before that fight, and they still allowed him to go out and fight. Is the grounds that he's suing the company on now. Are they going to get good lawyers and try to fight that tooth and nail? Absolutely. They don't want to set any precedents. But I understand where Mark's coming from, and I think, we as fighters all need to back him on that. Obviously it's changed since I competed. We didn't have USADA and all these other things going on, even 5 years ago when I was still competing. So I never seen what that looks like. I never had to report to anybody when I wanted to go on vacation or some of this other stuff that's being done with the athletes that are under contract right now. But I have to say I kind of agree with Mark Hunt's position. If they knew that he wasn't clean going into fight night, then that fight probably should have never happened. It shouldn't have been allowed to happen. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. Obviously, the class action lawsuit is a whole nother can of worms with the named plaintiffs listed, Kung Lee and Nate Corey and John Fitch and those guys all doing affidavits now on their experience with the anti-competitiveness of the UFC in general. And obviously class action suits can take a long time to settle, but they've got three of the biggest class action law firms in the country that have all signed on, donating their time and energy. So they obviously feel pretty good about their position. 2017 is going to be a very interesting year for mixed martial arts. I think that, the sport exploded so quickly, became so popular so fast. Obviously since 2005 and the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, it's really been changed and skyrocketed on a global level. And it almost seems like there needs to be a bit of a correction. We've got 2, sometimes 3 shows every weekend now. It doesn't have the same, sex appeal or luster or whatever you want to call it that it had when there was 8 or 9 shows a year, and you kind of got to know those athletes, and you wanted to see whether they were going to win or they were going to lose, or what they were going to say in their interview. And obviously guys like Chael Sonnen and now Conor McGregor took all that part of the marketing and the fight game to a whole new level in MMA. But I just think that, there's 80% of the fighters, I don't know who they are. I don't even know where they came from.
Yeah, it's definitely something that a lot of fans are echoing right now. So it's going to be a crazy year in MMA. Now, Randy, before we let you go, we want to talk about your acting career, which is a lot of exciting stuff going. And the first piece of exciting news that recently came out was there's going to be a 4th Expendables movie. Now, Stallone said everyone's expecting something different, and we're going to give it to him. Have you spoken to him yet about Toll Road's return to the movie?
I have spoken to him. Toll Road will absolutely be a big part of the story and part of the team.
Excellent.
Going into Expendables 4. I'm excited to see the script. I have had a chance to talk to him a little bit about the direction he wants to head. So it'll be interesting when I actually see the script. I know he's working on that diligently now, and we're greenlit, it sounds like, for May, June timeframe to start filming. I have no idea who they're bringing in, where the story is going to take us, who's coming back. That's all been rumored. all those numbers as well. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that you don't know what's going to happen in this one just yet, but a lot of people for a long time have been saying they want to see Jackie Chan. Do you think there's any kind of chance that maybe this is the one where Jackie comes down and parties with the Expendables? And is there maybe someone that you'd like to see join the team?
You know, I heard after Expendables 2 that Jackie Chan was being considered for Expendables 3, and that Jet Li might not come back. And then obviously Jet did come back and actually had a significant role and character in 3. So I'm not sure if I haven't heard anything new about Jackie since we were finished with 2 and looking at 3. I heard the Dwayne Johnson rumor. I heard the Hulk Hogan rumor. But I really have no official news. There's nothing I can say there.
It's one of those things where you guys have done the movies previously together. It just looks like you guys have such a fun time hanging out in between takes and while the movie's taking place when you go to all these different locations around the world. I mean, you'd be excited because it's a huge franchise and a huge movie, but is a part of you excited just because of the fact that you get to sort of hang out with your friends again for a period of time?
Absolutely. That's a huge piece of it. It's always fun to work, and sometimes you pinch yourself when you're suiting up and getting to do this thing. But it's even more fun and a whole new level of fun. It's like old home week when all the guys come back together and we all get back on set and get to see each other, catch up, and work with each other again.
All right, Randy. Well, before we let you go, we have to ask, we know acting is going great. You've got a lot of things going on. You've got a movie called Bruja and the Lost City of the Gold coming out as well. But we have to ask this. With Fedor coming into Bellator and this being the age of legends fighting each other, you spoke about, it wasn't that long ago where you really had to think about whether you were going to take that fight or not, and you considered it. Is there still any chance you'd consider making a movie-style comeback and possibly fighting one more time, or will you be keeping your fighting to the big screen?
I think I'll keep my fighting to the big screen. Things are going well there. I'm happily retired. As we just discussed, I think the sport's changed a little bit, and I certainly could never see myself wearing the uniform. Obviously, Mitrione is getting a shot at Fedor coming up here in a couple months. That's going to be a really interesting matchup. And obviously, when Fedor came out and started fighting again, my phone blew up. With just that question, was I going to take that and come back? And this doesn't make sense. At 53 years old, I'm in great shape. Don't get me wrong, and I've held up pretty well. But great shape and fight shape are two different things. And having now not been in fight shape for 5.5, going on 6 years, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for me to risk trying to get back into fight shape and take a fight like that. I'm having too much fun doing what I'm doing.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, some big fights coming up on the big screen, some great movies coming out. Guys, it's going to be a huge year for Randy Couture. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Randy_Couture and on Instagram at AXINATCH. Randy, thank you so much for coming onto the program. We're excited to see the new movies. We're excited to see what's next when it comes to MMA, Ali Act Reform, and we appreciate your time today. It's always a pleasure having you on the program.
Thanks. I appreciate it, guys. Take care.
Hey, this is Tony Okagui Ferguson, and you guys listen to Submission Radio. Keep tuning in, guys.
All right, guys, we're so excited to have this next man join us. He is a good friend of the program. We're not hitting up buffets. We're annoying him in his hotel room, trying to hang out and just loving spending time with him. He joins us back here on the program. He's from Fox Sports, Nerdcore Movement. He does great things there, and he's going to join us to share his opinion on some of the stuff that's happening in the world of MMA. Damon Martin, welcome back to Submission Radio.
Thanks for having me as always. And in addition to hanging out in my room, don't forget making Justin sleep in the tub. That's the other one that I like to do. So
Justin, a videographer, never plans on going back to America again after that trip. Love you, Justin. Please forgive us. Now, let's talk about last weekend. I mean, a couple of upsets happening with Pena and Cowboy Cerrone both losing in fights where, fans sort of thought they may have won, especially with Cerrone. Damon, I want to get your thoughts about the main event between Pena and Shevchenko. I mean, what were your thoughts on the way Shevchenko was able to beat Pena and just how Pena looked in this one?
You know, it was a pretty amazing performance from Valentina Shevchenko. I mean, I think what everyone imagined that fight would play out to be was kind of the opposite. You know, everyone assumed Valentina Shevchenko would be the striker, and if it stayed on the feet, she would win. And if it went to the ground, it would be Juliana Pena. But it was kind of the reverse of that. You know, once they hit the ground, I mean, Valentina hit two really impressive takedowns, those throws in the first round to kind of reverse the clinch work from Juliana Pena. And then, you know, to get taken down in the second, which was kind of a nice, you know, change of game plans for Juliana to abandon the clinch and go for just a straight double leg takedown. But then you saw Valentina, you know, immediately started working her jiu-jitsu, and she had no fear of going there. And I think that's some improvements we saw from her first fight with Amanda Nunes, where she kind of got stuck on the bottom and didn't really have a lot of ways out of there. I think that's something she's probably consciously been working on. So I was really impressed with Valentina Shevchenko, all facets of her game, from striking, from the clinch work, from the reversals in the clinch, all the way to her submission. For Juliana Pena, I thought she fought a smart game plan. She went for the clinch. She didn't try to play around on the outside with the striking. You know, one of the biggest concerns I had heard about Juliana Pena from the sources I spoke to was the way that she kind of comes in a little wild with just striking. You know, she has very wide looping punches, and that's a dangerous game to play with a striker as good as Valentina Shevchenko. So I think the game plan was solid. I think she had a great game plan for what she wanted to do. She just got caught.
Well, Casper, how much does this hurt the interest in the bantamweight division? I mean, with Rousey having one foot out the door and this sort of interesting matchup between Pena and Nunes now out the window, what do you think of Shevchenko and Nunes too? I mean, is this going to generate interest for the more casual fans?
I don't. Given the way the first fight played out, I don't think there's too much interest in the rematch, even though we clearly saw Valentina make some improvements. And, you know, I mean, the elite fighting the elite is always a good thing. I just think the first fight wasn't really that exciting. And if they're going to do it again, I don't know if this would even be a main event. I think this would potentially be a co-main event with something bigger and juicier headlining. And it is a little bit unfortunate. In hindsight, I think the UFC could have done better by having Pena sit on the sidelines, face the winner of either Rousey or Nunes. There's storylines either way, and even when there aren't, Juliana Pena does a really good job of promoting fights and talking a lot of trash, saying things that at times seem crazy, but regardless garner interest. And the funny thing is that regardless, we may not even see that fight next. I mean, Dana White said that Nunes needs to defend her belt. The obvious fight to make is Shevchenko Nunes too, but Nunes has been talking about how she wanted to go up to featherweight and things like that. I don't know when this fight will take place, but I think the UFC have kind of put themselves in a corner where they're forced to do a rematch that I don't really think there's much interest in.
Yeah, I was a fan of having Pena maybe get the title shot as well, because there you get an opportunity for someone who can speak a little bit on the microphone, bring a bit of interest into the fight. And I feel like you could have sold the win streak that she had. What do you think, Damon? Was this a mistake making Pena fight Shevchenko in this tough matchup and sort of losing that opportunity?
I don't think so, because the thing is for all the talk and the chatter that Juliana has had, and she's done a good job at that. I mean, she's a very good speaker. She doesn't mind speaking her mind, which is obviously as us as interviewers, we love. But I still didn't get the buzz. You know, I still didn't get a lot of buzz from Juliana Pena. What I saw a lot, and again, I go on all the forums, I go on the underground, I go on, kind of see what fans are saying. And I know, typically Twitter and other things are, kind of overtly negative, but a lot of people were saying that, she hadn't really proven herself. She hadn't really gone out there and had that big win. I mean, she beat Kat Zingano at UFC 200. She lost round one. She came back and won the second and third round, but nothing really exciting. It wasn't like a dominant performance. It wasn't like a lopsided, TKO or submission or anything. So I think that Juliana was still, a fight away from really jumping in there and proving that she belonged in there with Amanda Nunes or, had it been Ronda Rousey. She just didn't have that buzz about her. And I think this fight was her chance to do it. It was a main event. It was on Fox. All that talk, she had a chance to back it up, and she ran into a bit of a buzzsaw. And Valentina Shevchenko is coming into her own a little bit. I had interviewed her before the fight, and she was very well spoken. She's kind of learning to come into herself a little bit. I agree. I don't think the fight with Amanda Nunes is going to be a massive fight, but again, Holly Holm knocked out Ronda Rousey, and she's still co-headlined a card with Conor McGregor her next fight out. That's going to happen. So if Amanda Nunes fights Valentina Shevchenko, maybe you have them, co-main event, the card that was rumored right now with Stipe and Dos Santos. If that fight happens, maybe you hold them out till the summer and see what's going on. John Jones fighting the winner of Cormier Johnson. So, I mean, listen, I don't think it's an insult to have them co-main event a card, but you can still make it a big fight and not necessarily have them headline.
Yeah, you got to put them strategically in a place where you know people are going to stick around to watch, to really know more about them and know more about what they can do and sort of witness the fight if it does play out in a more exciting fashion. Casper, I mean, Cerrone's also lost a bit of steam after his loss to Jorge Masvidal. A lot of people are wondering if it was a mistake for Cerrone to take the fight on short notice. And another thing is, was it a mistake to put him up against Masvidal where a loss kind of hurts him a little bit more? We spoke to Coach Wink about it just earlier in the program where he said he didn't think that the fast turnaround was an issue, but do you think these things were an issue?
I mean, you never really know. I don't know Cerrone's mindset. I think that I think that the people that are saying that maybe it's taking a little bit away from Jorge's performance. I mean, Masvidal is a really, really good boxer, and Cerrone's not known for his head movement. I didn't really have a definitive pick going into this fight, but the way it played out wasn't really all that surprising. I mean, you know, he pressured Cerrone. Cerrone got a little bit frustrated. He wasn't able to, sort of set his momentum and his pace. I think the downside is that a guy like Cerrone, he's a big hit with the casual fans. Masvidal still a little bit unknown. Great fighter, but not as known. I don't think he has that natural charisma, but maybe that's going to come through the more he sort of gets promoted. The good thing is that with welterweight, I don't think that it necessarily needed Cerrone to get a title shot. It's pretty logjam at the moment. I mean, you've got poor Damian Maia waiting for a fight for what seems like forever, or a title shot, I should say. So regardless of what happens with Stephen Thompson and Tyron Woodley, you've got Maia waiting in the wings. You've still got Robbie Lawler really close by. I mean, you could have done Cerrone, Robbie Lawler instead of Masvidal, but you can still do that fight now. I mean, Cerrone's an action fighter. That's the way he's been labeled. And is this really going to take too much away from him and people wanting to see Cerrone fight on any card against anyone and any time? I don't think so. So I think Cerrone's fine. He'll win a few more fights. Maybe get that elusive title shot. In the meantime, we might see Nick Diaz come back. We might see, who knows, maybe there'll be a trilogy between Tyron and Stephen Thompson. Maybe GSP will come back. So I don't think it really hurts the welterweight division too much.
Yeah, and Dana White speaking about the fact that he offered Nick Diaz, Damian Maia, and if he doesn't take it, maybe he gives it to Jorge Masvidal. So Damian Maia versus Masvidal, I mean, you got to feel for Maia if that's a situation that comes to play. But Damon, back to Cerrone, what does he need to do to sort of bounce back from this? And can you still use him as a draw in these UFC cards in a time where you're really sort of stuck to find a draw to sell these events?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't blame Cowboy for doing what Cowboy did. I mean, that's Cowboy. I mean, if we ask Cowboy to just suddenly become a fighter who fights 3 times a year, he's not Cowboy. So he got caught. He got beat. I think instead of taking away from Cowboy, we got to give credit to Jorge Masvidal for putting on a stellar performance. He was very confident in calling that fight out, and he went out there and delivered, and good for him. As far as Cowboy goes, listen, it's not a. You got to put him back in there. I mean, I think obviously he's got to take a little bit of time off. I mean, he did get knocked down basically twice in that fight. You could have argued the first round should have been stopped, and then he comes out and takes more damage in the second round. So, having him take a few months off just to allow his head and body and time to rest is great. But I think you put him back in there. Like I said, May, there's a card going to Dallas. There's always going to be these big summertime cards out there. And it was just like with the fight with Matt Brown. It didn't really make sense on paper. I mean, Cowboy was on a winning streak. Matt had lost a couple. But still, who didn't want to see Matt Brown fight Cowboy Cerrone? And guess what? It ended up being a phenomenal fight. You could argue that, Jorge Masvidal hadn't quote unquote earned a fight with, Cowboy Cerrone. He was number 12 ranked. He had 2 wins at welterweight. What did he do? And then he goes out there and wins. So that's Cowboy. Like I said, I mean, are you telling me right now, if it plays out and they make Cowboy Cerrone against Nick Diaz, you wouldn't watch that fight? If they make Cowboy Cerrone against Robbie Lawler, you're not going to watch that fight? So there's still fights for Cowboy. He's still always going to be a draw, and he's kind of the fighter's fighter. He goes out there and does exactly what he's going to say, and he never makes excuses, win, lose, or draw.
Well, Cass, I mean, Pena and Cowboy losing a bit of steam for now, and it kind of looks like the company is struggling to get cards together. This coming weekend, the card is headlined by Korean Zombie and Dennis Bermudez, and the UFC London announced their main event to be Jimmy Manuwa versus Corey Anderson. And while these are all still exciting fights, they're not really matchups that garner main event status or, I suppose, a draw. What do you think about these times that we're in with UFC struggling to maintain their schedule and put together fights to sell these events? MMA fans, is the UFC in a bit of strife here, or do you think this is something that bounces back later on in the year?
I wouldn't necessarily say strife. I think there's always been these ebbs and flows in MMA. 2014 was a terrible year for the UFC with all the injuries. 2015 was a great year, and 2016 I think was even better. I don't really have any fear that the UFC will bounce back. That depends on a few things, but a lot of people predicted this last year when they saw these stacked cards like UFC 200 and then most importantly UFC 205, which was stacked to the tits. They knew that come early January, February, March, and maybe even all the way into April, you're not really going to have too much left. You're not really going to have too many stars that aren't either recovering or fights that have already happened. So it's not really that much of a surprise. Then you've got the fact that Conor McGregor is currently on hiatus, and then Ronda Rousey may never come back. So I just think it's a bit of a transition period. By around about halfway through the year, maybe even earlier, whenever it is that Conor McGregor decides to come back, and we don't even know if that's going to be in the UFC or in boxing, I think that there will be a little bit more clarity. There'll be other fights that, will be a little bit more juicy. We saw things like a UFC 207. Theoretically, Cain Velasquez and Verdun were supposed to square off against for the number one contender for the heavyweight title, and now we're kind of stuck with Junior Dos Santos versus Stipe, which is a good fight, by the way, but I just think a lot of it is timing, and I don't think the UFC are really going to do these massive stacked cards anymore, because I believe it was Dave Meltzer who pointed out really well that even though UFC 200 and UFC 205 were really, really stacked, they paled in comparison in terms of pay-per-view numbers to, say, UFC 196 and UFC 202. It really is the main event that is the biggest draw, and I think that it's been a learning experience for the UFC, and we're not going to see that anymore. We're going to see cards that have a very, very top-heavy, have a really big main event, maybe a big co-main event, and even pay-per-views. The rest is sort of going to be, put together.
Damon, I mean, Casper mentioned it. Ronda Rousey, 1 foot out the door. Conor McGregor, who knows when he's going to come back. John Jones, he'll be sort of coming back mid-year. There's some rumblings about maybe they'll consider taking Brock Lesnar back mid-year. But is the UFC creating enough new stars to sort of support these big events coming in the future? Do you feel that way?
You can argue and say, no, there's not a lot of big stars when you compare them to Conor McGregor or Ronda Rousey, but you could say the same thing before Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey. You can never predict how these things are going to play out. Conor McGregor, he talked a great game. And I remember someone threw a tweet of mine back in my face from a few years ago when somebody asked me about Conor, breaking records, and I said, I just don't think he'll ever break GSP's record. And now I feel like I have egg on my face. And at this point, I'm a Conor believer. Like I said, I think Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, later, but I think that fight could be, bigger than Pacquiao Mayweather. That's how big I think that fight could be because of what Conor brings to the table now. I'm a believer. But like I said, a few years ago, when they asked me that question, I said, come on, I don't think he's going to break GSP's records, because at that point, GSP kind of had that, insurmountable, number next to his name of the pay-per-views he sold and the draws he had. So you never think someone's going to be the draw until they are the draw. You kind of have to get smacked in the face with a little bit. So right now, are they building the stars they need? I don't know. You could argue no, but then who knows? Like I said, UFC 206, I know pay-per-view wise it didn't do great numbers, but the fact that there was so much buzz about that event afterwards, the great Cowboy Matt Brown fight, Max Holloway doing what he did, the Doo Ho Choi Cub Swanson fight, yes, it didn't sell a lot of pay-per-views, but then you saw the ratings they did on Fox 2 weeks later for that they did on Christmas Eve, and it did huge numbers. Now, I don't know that that's necessarily going to translate, so when Max Holloway fights Jose Aldo, it's going to sell 1 million pay-per-views, because I really don't think it will. But if those two can get together and they put a solid co-main event on that same card, and it does 400,000 pay-per-view buys, that's pretty good. That's still pretty good. It's not Conor numbers, but it's still pretty good. So it just depends on how you look at it. Is anyone going to be Conor or Ronda right now? No, they don't have another Conor or another Ronda right now, but there was not a Conor or a Ronda before they got here in the first place. So it just depends on how you want to gauge that star status. Like I said, it depends. If Stipe Miocic, what he did in Cleveland last year, did that pay-per-view do bonkers numbers? And obviously CM Punk played a big part in that. But did that pay-per-view do solid numbers? Yes. But think about that live audience. Were they there for CM Punk? No. They were there because it was Cleveland. Most of them were there for Stipe. It was an awesome moment. So again, it depends on how you want to gauge stardom, and then you kind of build from there. So Stipe's next fight, if it's against Junior Dos Santos, show people that first fight. That was one of my favorite heavyweight fights of all time. No, they're not going to sell the fight the way that Conor sells the fight, but it's still a fun fight. And if that can do 350 to 400,000 pay-per-views with a decent co-main event, that's a good number for them. That's a very good heavyweight headliner, considering when you match them up with the numbers that Verdun got, that Kane got, things like that. So again, it just depends on how you want to gauge stardom. You just can't gauge it next to Conor and Ronda because no one is going to match those numbers, at least for now.
Well, let's touch on Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. I mean, Ariel Helwani did an excellent job interviewing him in that iPay-per-view over there for an hour. There's some stuff that came out of it. Conor McGregor said that, speaking of the fight with Mayweather, he said there's a lot of steps to get the fight done. It's the fight that people want. It's the fight that I want. I'm curious, is he being honest here, or is this just another bargaining play for more money in the UFC?
No, I think he really wants it. I think if you look at what McGregor's been saying for all these years, he's saying that he wants to make $100 million. He wants to, own a slice of the UFC and things like that. And even in that iPay-per-view, even in that interview, you sort of admitted that the whole thing about equity in the UFC, it's not really a priority. He admitted that it's probably not going to happen, at least not straight away, that maybe someday once he retires or later on down the road, he'd want to own a slice of the UFC. So I don't think that he's necessarily posturing. I think that the quickest way to making that $100 million, it's not in the UFC. It is in a fight against Mayweather. And I just think there's too much money to be made. We know how much he likes money. I don't think he'd pass something up like that. And, people talk about, well, what if he loses? What if he gets ridiculed? Would it really be ridiculed to go in as an MMA fighter and lose to one of, if not the greatest boxers of all time? So I think there's too much to lose to just piss fighting around. I think he definitely wants this fight. And I think he will do everything he can in his power to make sure this fight happens. He's already talking about how he could go in and do it by himself, but it makes a lot more sense to do it together with the UFC. So, I mean, I don't know when it's going to happen. You can pretty much guarantee it's not going to happen in 2017. He essentially admitted that, but I'm hoping at least somewhat it will, and I definitely think Conor wants it to.
Damon, let's talk about the payment here. I mean, Mayweather spoke in multiple interviews how he wants the fight, but the deal wasn't quite what Conor McGregor wanted. I mean, he spoke about Mayweather Promotions, the UFC, and the money, Floyd Mayweather Promotions coming together. Do you see a scenario here where Mayweather sort of gets closer to that 50% deal that McGregor is looking for?
I think eventually they will, because there's so much money on the table and there's so much money to be made that you can't walk away from that. I mean, will Floyd get the $100 million guarantee that he wants? Maybe not, but will Conor get the $100? Let's not forget, Conor said at one point he demanded $100 million as well. So, will they eventually come to an agreement where they could say maybe Floyd makes $75 million guaranteed, Conor makes $35 million guaranteed, and then they get a split of the pay-per-view profits along with the UFC? I mean, listen, at the end of the day, there is a lot of money to be made by everybody involved in this. And I know that, Dana has said if they do the card with the UFC, they're going to stack the undercard. I don't think you need to stack the undercard. It's what you guys said earlier. It's a main event driven sport. It always has been in a lot of ways. And if you put that fight card on there, I mean, those two getting together, I mean, you're talking about, the biggest superstar in boxing and the biggest superstar in mixed martial arts history getting together. The hype and the attention and the buzz would be insane. The curiosity factor would be insane. So I think eventually it will come together. I think there's a better chance of it happening this year, actually. I've actually heard, sources I've spoke to have said, start looking at the fall, September, because, Floyd always traditionally liked to fight in May and he liked to fight in September. Those are two big dates that Floyd Mayweather always liked to fight in. I could see it happening in September, October, maybe something like that. If they can put together a good, a deal, because it's clear Conor wants it. It's clear Mayweather wants it. And let's be honest, the UFC wants it too, because it's a massive, massive payday when really they're only going to end up ultimately paying one guy. They're going to pay Conor because, Floyd's going to be getting paid out of the pay-per-view more than anything else. Maybe that's how they work it out. Maybe that's how they chop it up. Maybe they say, hey, we're going to give you $25 million guarantee, but then you're going to get a bigger chunk of the pay-per-view, knowing full well that this thing could sell, 4.7, 4.8 million pay-per-views. Who knows? So I think it will happen. I'm done saying it's not going to happen. I think there's just too much money on the table, and I think eventually they will come to an agreement because everyone's going to cash in on this thing, and that's why I think ultimately it will come together.
Damon, people have had rivalries with the UFC before. Randy Couture, Tito Ortiz, GSPs back and forth with the UFC now. I mean, we've seen it all, but Dana White said when asked at a post-fight press conference, if Conor McGregor tries to sort of cross the UFC, it will be an epic fail. Do you think that McGregor is in a position where he holds a lot more power than the other fighters did in those previous rivalries? And do you think if it does go ahead and McGregor does go against the UFC, it may not be so clear-cut this time?
Well, I do, but there's more of a reason for this than just the power that he holds in terms of his attraction, because that's Conor McGregor. He is the biggest star to ever step foot in the octagon. There's no doubt about that, and there's no question about that at this point. We've proven it. The numbers are there to back up the fact that he is the biggest star of all time, bigger than Ronda Rousey, bigger than Randy Couture, bigger than Tito Ortiz, bigger than anybody else. But here's the other factor that no one's really playing into it. Dana is no longer the final word on these things. I mean, I know Dana's running the UFC, but he's not the final word anymore. Ari Emanuel and Patrick Whitesell are going to be the final word on these kind of things, and they've got investors and people in a bottom line, and they're talking about WME IMG. There's been rumors for the past year that they're going to go public in 2017 at some point. Then you've got stockholders who will have an opinion on these kind of factors. Now, it's not to say they're going to tell the UFC what to do necessarily, but they're going to have a bottom line and a stock price that they're going to have to pay towards. And so the bottom line may not be Dana. Dana may not be able to, Dana may not bend. Dana may not break. He may say, screw you, I'm not going to do it. And guess what? There's still two guys who actually own the organization now who can say, hey, we see good financial sense in this. And I haven't really dug into it to see what business dealings WME IMG has possibly had with Floyd Mayweather in the past. They've got their hands in everything, though. If you start really digging into WME IMG, they are a massive conglomerate. They've dealt with business deals in terms of entertainment with virtually everybody at some level, whether we're talking about TV networks, superstars, sports, athletes, whatever. So to say, if I started really digging into it, I'd have to wager at some point they've done some kind of business with Floyd Mayweather, whether it was a sponsorship deal or a TV thing. I have no idea. But now the bottom line is no longer Dana. And so that's why I think Conor holds more power, because there is a different person he can go to now. He can go to Ari Emanuel, and I don't know Ari, but I know a lot of people who do know Ari or who have dealt with Ari. And what you see in the show Entourage is very similar to the real Ari Emanuel. He is a business maker. He is a guy who wants to go out there and make money. Remember that first season of Entourage? You guys watch Entourage?
Of course.
I know every line. Yep.
Okay, so remember that first season when Vince, he gets, or maybe I think it's season one, when he gets that, he has that movie he does with Jessica Alba, and he comes off of that, and he wants him to do Matterhorn. Remember Matterhorn,
Yeah.
the big blockbuster in a theme park thing, and Ari's pushing it because Ari knows that that's going to make him the most money. But Vince wants to do this little indie project. He wants to do the Queens Boulevard. He wants to do the indie movie, and so that's what I'm pointing out. Is Ari was always about the blockbuster. He was always about pushing the blockbuster, the big money movie, the big way you're going to make money. And guess what? The way he's going to make money. Ari Emanuel's the same way. I guarantee it. He's going to be about the blockbuster deal, the blockbuster money. And guess what? Conor McGregor makes the blockbuster money, so guess what? He's ultimately probably going to end up siding with Conor McGregor more than anything else because he's going to bring in the most money.
Wow, fascinating. I mean, very interesting to see what happens with that. The big changes happening in MMA in 2017. It's just wild to see what's happening. Now, guys, before we wrap up, we're going to talk a little bit about movies. We're going to get your thoughts, Damon, on a couple of big flicks that are coming out. I want to sort of talk to you a little bit about the trailers and get your thoughts on that. But before we jump to that, Casper, you have a review for us on Split. For people who don't know, Split is a movie with James McAvoy where he plays, I believe, 23 or 24 personalities in one movie. A lot of people have been talking about this. It's by M. Night Shyamalan, who has done a lot of interesting types of movies. A lot of people saying this is his big return to a very, very interesting type of movie. Casper, take it away. Tell us, is this worth watching?
I think it was a really good movie. I don't know if I'm willing to say that it was amazing, and here's why. The movie starts off as a psychological thriller, and I liked that. It had a really strong storyline. It was going places, and then at some point, it sort of becomes a supernatural horror. And for me, I just thought that was a little bit of a cop-out. I think that when you've got a psychological thriller, there are certain constraints, certain rules, and certain things that you have to do in the movie that make it a little bit more difficult to keep realistic. But I feel like the reward is there, and when a movie is realistic, especially a horror or a scary movie, it makes it that much more scary because you can see certain things happening and relate it to your life and go, wow, this is terrifying knowing this could actually happen. But once the movie becomes more towards the supernatural and towards the horror and towards a little bit ridiculous, that's kind of where I checked out a little bit. I thought that was the easy way out. I thought it was a bit of a cop-out. I think there's some really solid acting. I think James McAvoy did a really good job. All the supporting cast did a good job. I think that the movie did a pretty good job of exploring the characters and their backstories, or at least some of them. But yeah, just the ending, it kind of... it was like a car race, and the wheels fell off just a little bit towards the end. So my first official Timothy Johnson mustache review for 2017, I'm going to give it a 3. 3 solid Timothy Johnson mustaches. Good, decent, you should go see it, but it's not in any pound-for-pound rankings.
Wow, 3 Timothy Johnson mustaches. I'll tell you what, that's enough to get me to the cinemas to check it out. So I'll have to give it a watch, and me and Damon will have to see if we agree with that Timothy Johnson mustache rating. Now, Damon, before we get your thoughts on a couple of these movies coming out, I mean, some big news about Ben Affleck stepping down as director of the new Batman movie. And I was just trying to make sense of it all, because a lot of movies that he's directed, like The Town and Argo, were really good movies. He did a really, really good job in those movies. Also, he spoke about the fact that he doesn't just want to do a crap movie. He wants to make sure that this is a meaningful movie. I'm wondering, the fact that he stepped down as director, is this a problem for the movie because the studio sort of wants to push it out quicker?
Well, I have a lot of concerns about a lot of things that DC and Warner Brothers are doing right now because they don't seem to have a lot of direction. Almost all of their movies have gone through some sort of change, whether it's been a script change, it's been reshoots, it's been a director change. I think the only movie that hasn't had a director change recently has been the Aquaman movie with James Wan, but even that has gone through 2 different scripts going into that movie. I thought Ben Affleck was a brilliant choice because Ben Affleck is such a good director. I mean, The Town is amazing. Argo is amazing. Gone Baby Gone is amazing. And I thought he actually, like I said, the one bright spot of Batman versus Superman, in my opinion, was Ben Affleck. So I thought it was a good combination of putting him together, doing the writing and directing, and then obviously starring. I was looking forward to that. Let's not forget, I know people like to bag on Ben Affleck, but let's not forget he has an Oscar for writing. So, I kind of enjoyed that kind of triple threat combo we got out of him. And now now he's stepping down. I don't know what that ultimately means. What I think it ultimately means is DC just isn't on track. They don't have a sheer direction they want to head in for their movies, and it's continuously shown with all the people. Look at the Flash movie. They've had like 4 directors, 3 different scripts. They don't know what's going on with that movie, and that's another one that's supposed to be out in the near future. They just said they're going to do Green Lantern Corps, and it's going to be like Lethal Weapon in space, and I'm like, wow. Green Lantern's one of my all-time favorite characters. I've read a lot of Green Lantern comics. It's not Lethal Weapon in space. There are definitely funny moments, but I wouldn't categorize it as like Murtaugh and Riggs in space. So yeah, I mean, it's like I said, my faith in DC was rattled long before this. This is just another example of where I don't think they have direction the way that Marvel does.
Well, speaking of a superhero movie that a lot of people are excited about, Logan, which is the latest Wolverine movie, and Hugh Jackman says this is going to be the last time he plays Wolverine. The trailers have been absolutely fantastic. A different look at Wolverine, a more real, more sort of dirty, more sort of grungy, more realistic look at what his life is like. 2 fantastic trailers, one using Johnny Cash Hurt as the soundtrack. High hopes for this one, Damon. Do you think this will deliver to the expectation the fans are hoping for?
Yeah, I actually have pretty high expectations for this one. The first Wolverine movie, the X-Men Origins, was god-awful. The Wolverine, the actual movie called The Wolverine, was solid. It wasn't great, but it was solid. And I know everything I've heard about this one has been very, very high. I mean, when Ryan Reynolds, who I trust because obviously he did a phenomenal job on Deadpool, says that, this is the kind of movie that he could see being nominated for Oscars. Now, maybe he's a little bit overboard, but guess what? I thought Deadpool should have been nominated for an Oscar. And I think it's a disgrace that it didn't get nominated for an Oscar. But I think the fact that he says that says a lot. I mean, like I said, I can't imagine he's just going to say that without, actually having some validity behind it. And I think it's going to be good. The trailers are amazing. I think they're going in a completely different direction. They're not trying to make this a big blockbuster movie. If you saw the trailers, you don't see a lot of explosions and, a lot of crazy action scenes. This looks like a very grounded kind of in reality kind of movie. Again, very much what I thought made Deadpool great was that they didn't try to make it bigger than what it was. And so, yeah, I have high expectations. I think it's going to be a good surprise film, although I will say Hugh Jackman says it's his last movie. I know he's your countryman and everything, but I'm going to call BS on that because I think Hugh Jackman will show up in Deadpool either 2 or 3. I think he's going to show up and grant Ryan Reynolds' wish, and he's going to show up at some point in a Deadpool movie.
Oh, man, it has to happen. And I mean, knowing Hugh Jackman, I think he's a big fan of that also. I think he'll be in one of those movies as well. Quickly, final question before we let you go and wrap up the show. The Power Ranger trailers. Now, people have been divided about this. The first one, I kind of liked. The second one, It's starting to look a little bit corny to me, a little bit Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. A lot of CGI. It's looking like the direction may be a bit kiddie-ish and sort of not what a lot of people were hoping for. What's your takeaway from the actual trailers that you've seen so far?
I'm optimistic as much as you can be optimistic about a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie. I mean, it's still, it's ultimately still kind of made for kids or tweens or however you want to say. But I will say a couple things. One, they got Bryan Cranston, which is a home run because that guy's amazing. And number two, the big win here is it's not being made by Michael Bay. The fact that he doesn't have his hands on this thing like he did with Mutant Turtles and like he did with Transformers and G.I. Joe and everything else, the fact that Michael Bay is not involved in this in any way, shape, or form actually makes me want to go see it that much more because I have hopes that it actually could be decent.
Well, there you guys go. So much stuff happening in 2017 from all facets. Guys, you can check out Damon Martin on Twitter at Damon Martin, a lot of great work on Fox. Also, Nerdcore Movement is the place to go to cover all of these big movies coming out and all the trailers. Damon does such a great job. We also want to thank Tyson Pedro, Coach Winkeljohn, Randy Couture, Dillon Danis for being on the program. So much fun this week, Cass. And with that, we want to thank all of you for tuning in. It's a new time slot, but we've had a lot of positive response, a lot of people tuning in. And just like that, we'll see you guys next week for another big show next Wednesday and Thursday. See you guys then.